Welcome back to Feelings Forward. Today we're joined by someone very special. She's my childhood friend and also an Odissi dancer, Vrinda. Welcome, Vrinda.
Thank you for having me, Niharika.
Thank you for being here. Before we start, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. So I'm Vrinda Chadha from Delhi, and I'm an Odissi dancer. I'm a lot of other things, but I think today we are speaking to each other in the capacity of me being an Odissi dancer. I have been training in this art form for over 2 decades now, and I'm a disciple of Guru Ranjana Goharji. She's a Padma Shri and SNA awardee, and I started my journey under her from a young age.
Lovely, welcome.
Thank you.
When you say you're a lot of other things as well, let's get into that. Apart from being a dancer, who is Vrinda?
Wow, that's a very pointed question, and honestly, I don't have a direct answer to that when you ask me like this. But dance is actually a very, very important part of who I am. It does form a major part of my identity, and fortunately, it's not the kind of profession that you can just switch off from, right? You have to be very invested in it. I think any artist would relate, any aspiring artist would relate that this does become a very, very integral part of who you are. It defines you. But having said that, I think there are many things that make me who I am. Apart from that as well, my interests, what I like to do when I'm not dancing. So yeah, I guess those things.
Great. We will get into all of that. What do you do? What are your interests? But before, a technical question that's coming to my mind, I'm sure a lot of people are confused about it as well, is that Odissi being a classical dance form, how is it different from, let's say, like a Kathak or Bharatnatyam, for example?
So, actually, all the classical dance forms of India have common roots in the scriptures. But what makes them different is maybe their geography. So, Odissi happens to be from the eastern part of our country. And that's the major difference, you could say, geographic difference. But apart from that, also in terms of the movement vocabulary, the execution, Odissi is a very lyrical dance form. It's very graceful. It comes from the temples of Odisha. So you see a lot of sculpturesque representation in the art form, a lot of circular, graceful movements in how the hand is placed. The arms are bent, the knees are bent, and the rhythmic patterns are also designed in such a way that aids that grace in the dance form. So you would see a lot of straight lines and those kind of angles in maybe Bharatnatyam or Kathak, which are not there in Odissi. Odissi has its different kind of beauty. Yeah. And of course, there are many other differences, but that'll get too technical. I don't want to turn it into a class.
Right. How did you choose this profession? Like, what led you to it?
I think I'm a firm believer of destiny planning things for you. I had no intention of when I started to take it up in the future as something that I end up doing professionally. But yes, from the get go, I did feel very connected to it, even as a child. I think my parents were quite sure that they wanted me to have additional training in, different art forms. So not just in dance, they also put me into Hindustani vocals, things that went along with dance, complemented dance, because I think they saw that I have an aptitude for dance, so they felt that let's encourage this. So that's how it started. As I mentioned, my guru ji stays in the same vicinity as where I stay. So, and she's a well-known personality. So my parents, just put me into classes there. And when you start, you really don't know where this is going to take you. It's just like, okay, she's learning dance.
Yeah.
But I think I took it quite seriously, and also I had the right kind of mentoring from my teacher, and she always guided me in the direction of, ki whatever you do it with your heart. Otherwise, you don't do it at all. With that kind of vision and training, I always felt like what I'm doing, I really need to put my all into it. And I also enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much. I think when we were in school, the focus was more on Kathak because our teachers, our dance teachers were mostly Kathak trained. So that was also nice to be able to, because I had a foundational training in one classical art form, which was Odissi. It helped me do what I was doing in school also.
Right.
So, because as I shared, the foundations are the same for all styles. So you kind of understand where the other is coming from. So yeah, that's how it all started. I didn't really consciously choose Odissi. I think once I, became a teenager, grew a little older, I realized that Odissi is a style in which I feel more comfortable, in which I am able to express myself better. And eventually I realized it is my calling.
You didn't choose it, it chose you.
Yeah. I mean, it is cliche to say that, but I really think that that's the case.
That's good. That's amazing. Destiny has its part to play.
Yes.
When you talk about expression, expressing day in and day out in a dance form, so many different emotions, is there any kind of burnout associated with that?
Definitely. I think we're only human, and what we're expecting ourselves to do as artists is a little demanding sometimes because, but honestly, it's not very different from what anybody else may be going through in their everyday life. I mean, in one single day, we go through a variety of emotions and feelings. So it's not like we have a stagnant emotion all day. We're going through various emotions and sub layers of emotions. So I think, of course, when you're performing, and especially if you're performing an expressional piece, so there are pure dance pieces, there are expressional pieces, there are combinations of both. But if you are doing something purely expressional, it is definitely much more challenging than doing a pure dance piece because you have to be very mentally engaged, emotionally engaged, connected to the character or emotion that you need to bring out, and do it in such a way that it doesn't look mechanical. The audience has to be convinced about what you're doing, and at the same time, while you are having to think about these things, you also have to lose yourself. So I think it's something that comes only with practice, a lot of practice, a lot of discipline of the mind also. That's why, discipline is very much associated with the Indian classical art forms. Discipline of the body, the mind, how you carry yourself, all of that. And I think I also am, although I've been learning for training for the last 2 decades, I still feel I'm very much, very young. And in terms of my training, I have a long way to go. Because in this art form, it's almost like as you age, your experience adds on to how you will emote on stage. So I'm still learning, I would say. I also feel very inspired when I see certain artists who move me when they express. So yeah.
I was thinking, when I was thinking of myself and I was like, okay, like a therapist, for example, we're holding space for others and it is draining because then when we come out of the therapy room, I find many times that I don't have the bandwidth to hold space for others anymore, like let's say personal relationships. I want to be held. So I was thinking that as a dancer as well, because you're performing on stage, you're emoting, there's so many, like there's a connection between mind and body. It's not just emotions, but how you express that through your body, through your facial expressions. I was thinking that could also be, and correct me if I'm wrong, could be exhausting. And when you come out of that performance or you leave that profession behind and get to maybe catering to your family, friends, does that impact you in any way?
Definitely. Especially when you're working on, say, a particular piece that needs you to emote sorrow. The storyline can be anything, but say, for example, the emotion is primarily sorrow. You have to draw a lot from your own experiences also. When was the last time I felt like this? Or some parallel to that situation. Think deeply about how you would feel if you were the character in that story. And of course, when that piece gets over, you can't just switch off. It lingers, it stays on. and it does affect your mood quite intensely. And yeah, I think, I mean, even if you're rehearsing, for example, for a program, and after the rehearsal you come back home, the kind of energy I would have otherwise on any other day with the people around me would not be the same. I'd want to go into my own zone and just, take my time
Yeah.
to come back.
Yeah.
So that happens.
That happens.
Yeah, I'm sure you can understand.
I can definitely understand. So, what helps on those days? Let's say if you're feeling emotionally drained, what helps you kind of get your energy back up?
I think personally for me, I like my space. I like to be on my own. And even if I seek out company, it's of people who I can really be very, very comfortable with. So, very close people in my life who would give me the company I need, but at the same time give me space. So, that helps. And also just doing things that slowly bring me back to it may not immediately help me. For example, maybe just sitting outside and reading a book, because you are then invested in something else, and maybe those emotions are slowly playing out in the back of your head, but they calm down. So just, I guess, ground myself by doing things that help.
That are calming.
That are calming, yeah. Not necessarily as a distraction, because you're still very aware of those things in the background. But sometimes even a distraction could help you.
Help.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Not distraction in terms of avoidance, but distraction just to focus on something else
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a bit.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
When we say mind and body are
Sorry,
connected,
I just want to go back to sleep helps.
sleep helps.
Sleep
Rest.
really helps. Rest really helps. Recovery. Because the next morning you wake up with a fresh perspective on the
Right.
same thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
I can hard relate to that.
Yes.
Sleep definitely helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. When you're saying about when you're talking about mind and body, and it's been, like you said, over 2 decades, which is a long time, and I've seen you in school as well. Being aware of the body, I don't know if I can frame the question, but it's popping up in my head like that. If I can frame it properly, did that make you self-conscious growing up, or did you feel that, oh, now there's a better sync between mind and body for me because I've been practicing for so long, since a young age?
I think when I was young, definitely not. Because I think when you're growing up, you are so conscious of the way you look. When you see yourself in the mirror, you're always wondering, oh, I wish this was different or this was better. That's how it's cruel, but that's just the kind of world we grew up in. I think it's a little kinder now. I'm not sure, but maybe with social media things have gotten worse. I really can't comment. But I think in our case also, there was that scrutiny, constant scrutiny on the way you view yourself and your body. And of course, when it's a performing body or an audience, you are even more worried about how evolving, changing, growing, transition from a young girl into a woman, all those things can have an impact. But I think with age and maturity, I have only become more and more comfortable in my body. And I realize that change is inevitable. It's and also an important part of it's reflective of who you've become. So you can't run away from it, and one should embrace it in its totality. And of course, there are expectations from you as a dancer. How you should look when you present yourself on stage is a very important part of, like, ideally how you should look. Of course, a lot of people are breaking those ideas also, but there is an ideal that is still set and expected of from a dancer. So that I don't know if to call it a pressure, but yeah, is to an extent, of course, always lingering, always there. But I don't think it's necessarily negative, because why not? One should be on one's toes to justify the profession they're in, and not go overboard and not torture yourself into looking a certain way. But what one needs to do to be a healthy,
So it's basically how you approach that pressure, you approach it, the mindset behind it, how you perceive it.
Yeah.
If you perceive it in a way that, okay, I'm motivated because I want to be healthy or I want to look a certain way, but not
Yeah.
take it negatively and kind of
Obsess
constantly
over it.
obsess
Yeah,
over it
yeah,
or
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like, oh, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
So it also is a lot to do with how you approach that pressure.
Absolutely. I think that does more harm than good.
But any times, like any examples that come to mind when we're especially talking about the body, even from your childhood or when you were growing up, that you particularly remember now that we're talking?
When I felt
When you felt conscious?
Yeah, I think I often wondered about while executing dance that, oh, I wish I was taller or wish I had longer limbs or, all those kind of things. I wish I was thinner. I mean, those are the typical things that we worry about as a young
As a young person.
person.
Or even older.
Even older sometimes, yeah. We're only human.
So what helped in those? I mean, you said time and maturity and change
Yeah.
and age came along, so
Yeah.
they had their roles to
Yeah.
play. Did the community, the dance community, also kind of play a role there?
I think I did see a lot of diverse examples as I grew up, and I realized that, oh, it's not necessary to have a certain ideal body type that is dancing, because you were being able to see all kinds of people present themselves in a dignified way on stage, no matter what they look like. So, of course, that brings in a lot of comfort that, there is space for other body types as well. And I think after a point, you hit a certain age where your stress threshold you're just like, no, I don't have the space bandwidth for this to bother me. It's not important enough. What's important is my craft and how I execute it, my skill. And that is what I want to work on. That is what requires my attention. Everything else will fall into place. Yeah. And like I said, there is a certain amount of discipline that, without saying that day in, day out, you have to follow a particular routine. So I think if you are happy mentally with other aspects of your life, only then can you expect yourself to follow that discipline and routine.
What would that routine look like?
So I think when people see a performing artist, a dancer or musician, I think they associate a lot of glamour and fame with it. It's actually, none of that is really, maybe if at all after a show, if you experience it, it's the byproduct of a lot of background hard work that is the major part that goes into it. And it is the training and the education part of it which excites me more, and the daily stuff of practicing, of reading, and there's a lot of theory and knowledge attached to these systems, dancing systems, that you have to know. So, and of course, your daily workout, which aids your dance. And I think as you age, that workout starts to look different because you want to dance long term. So, you need a lot of strengthening, for your knees, for your back. There are a lot of other things that you have to start thinking of. So, your workout regime also molds with that. A lot of yoga. So, yeah, I mean, there are multiple things that a dancer has to otherwise also do, keep doing in their daily life if they want to have a certain delivery on stage when it's time to perform. Yeah.
You were also mentioning about like teaching classes off camera. But does that also help in some way? Because it's not only about performance, then you are going into different areas but related to the same subject.
Yeah, definitely. Teaching is very enjoyable because I think at my current stage when I'm teaching, I also learn a lot in the process. As I see another body that is beginning to learn dance execute something. So in that process, it's like experiencing the joy of dance all over again because you're seeing it get formed in somebody else. It's very interesting, and I enjoy teaching quite a bit.
Yeah,
because I think it's the curiosity and this childlike wonder that you experience even when you're teaching.
Yeah,
I may not show it to the student, but I am thinking about it when it's happening in front of me.
Yeah. Where do you feel that mental health kicks in or in this profession? How do you feel they're connected to one another? I mean, I'm I must have not framed the question right in my head, but that's how it's popping up.
Yeah, I think it's very, very relevant. I mean, not just to this profession. Generally, it's important to accept how you're feeling and accept that you may not be okay on certain days and you don't have to always keep pushing yourself. I think because I earlier mentioned the discipline part, sometimes one could go overboard even with that and not allow oneself to take a break when it's needed. I can't pinpointedly think of any
Right.
mental health situation like that, but yeah, it's very, very.
Let's say on days that you're not feeling up to it and you have a big performance coming up, or you have practice, or you have a class, whatever, you have
Yeah.
your daily life happening. How do you push yourself, or do you take a break, or it depends on the situation?
Honestly, yeah, it depends on the situation. If I have a show that's lined up and I have to get to it, then then you have to. But if I have the luxury of time, if there's no pressing event that requires attention, I do think that it's okay to not get to it in the way that you normally would. Maybe you can approach it in a different way. You sit down with the music, you don't dance, you just think about it. So you can have days like that, and I think it's okay to be able to do that also.
Definitely, that's very important.
Yeah.
Let's say on days that you're not feeling your best, or you had a fight with a friend, does that impact the performance?
I think we've been hardwired to just switch off once you put on your ghungroos, once you're in your attire, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
You go on stage and just think about what you're doing. But I think if that negative emotion is there also, the artist finds a way to harness it if needed
Right.
in an expressional piece, for example. But yeah, if that doesn't happen, if it's just you're just doing a pure dance piece also, then I guess you just find a way to block that noise and come to the dancing
And I'm
part.
sure that takes training.
Actually, on the contrary, sometimes it's healing because you're doing something you love and it takes your mind off all the negativity. And that happens. Like sometimes if I'm feeling really low, but I tell myself to push a little bit and just go ahead and do my practice.
Yeah.
After it's over, I feel very rejuvenated and I feel glad that I did make that extra push and did it anyway because it helps.
It helps. So you were talking about putting on your ghungroos and your attire and getting ready. And whenever I see you on Instagram and like either like your videos, your dancing, or even your performances, I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of effort right there. Like in terms of the whole dress up, the makeup. Does that take a toll on your mental health per se, or is that stressful, or is it therapeutic in any way?
Aniharika, it's almost like the process of. So that's how I view it. It's something that one needs to do to get to feel complete as a performer and then go on stage. So the whole aharya, which is getting ready, for your performance aspect, is a very important part of how you present yourself on stage. So it's almost like if I don't do this, then I'm not doing justice to what I will be doing on stage. So agar itni mehnat ki hai, you've worked so many days in your rehearsal, practice, whatever, and then if you don't do that,
Then it's
of no
Makes
use.
sense.
So it's just part of the process. And the word you use, therapeutic, it indeed is because it allows you to focus. For those, the whole process takes around 2 hours if you've just started, and once you become, you've had some experience, you can get ready in half an hour, 1 hour also if the situation demands. Sometimes if you're traveling, if you're on a tour, you reach a location and then in 20 minutes or half an hour you have to go on stage. So you have to get used to hustling also like that.
Yeah.
But ideally, if you have time, then 1.5 hours, or if on a good day, if you have 2 hours, then the whole 2 hours ka process really helps you to zone in. Because all you are thinking about is the point of performance, the final goal.
And you're in the moment.
You're in
like
the
you're
moment.
you're present. So it's somewhat
Yeah.
grounding as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, it's very grounding. I mean, just the process of taking a paintbrush and making that eye,
Yeah.
you have to focus really hard
Yeah.
on that one act.
For sure, because when I'm putting eyeliner, like I put here, it's thoda thick hai. And I'm looking at your picture and I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
Thank you. No, but I think that's easier, right? Because it's like a bigger eye, so
Bigger. It's
you have
not
more
that thick.
canvas.
Fair
But
enough.
yeah, I think maybe there was a reason why in the scriptures it was given this way, that you go through this process in order to reach that stage. Because it is important.
I was thinking about expectations because I'm also coming from a very personal space right now. And I'll share, like, let's say I'm a therapist. And there are certain expectations that, oh, you're a psychologist, you're a therapist, you understand mental health, so
Yeah.
you should be like this. You should be better at regulation, you should be more understanding, you shouldn't be angry, you should be well managed and, very zen kind of a person. So those expectations are attached to me. Does that happen in dance? And where I'm coming from is because it's a graceful
Yeah.
art form.
Yeah.
And are you expected to be graceful outside of dance as well?
Yeah. No, that's a very, good question. And I think it's so unfair to have such expectations from people. I mean, everybody is human.
Yeah.
Everybody has good and bad days. I think in my generation and the younger generation now, it's a little bit more chill. You're allowed to be many things. You don't have to hold it together all the time.
Yeah.
And you can go crazy sometimes. It's absolutely fine. But I think being in the art form kind of naturally also makes you hold yourself a certain way.
Right.
It's not something you're consciously doing, but you become that. I'm sure you might relate,
I relate.
right? Like, even if the society doesn't have that, your immediate people don't have that expectation of you, or you may tell yourself, I don't care. But generally, you become a certain
Correct.
kind of a person.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel that too. That does spill over.
It spills
It, of
over.
course, makes you better at regulation. I can't deny it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Because it's about culture and tradition, and we're living in a modern world, how do those 2-3 things intersect with one another? Is there a definition of a good woman? Or this question again is coming from a place of expectations
Right.
only. So you're expected to, for example, behave a certain way. How does that traditional and modern kind of aspects of life intersect?
I think I don't find that dissonance happening as such, because I think the world we're living in now accepts a woman, even if the dance. I mean, I don't think the dance field has any. The traditional part of it is the art form itself, but how you carry yourself as a person.
It doesn't define that.
Yeah, it doesn't define that. You don't have to be, traditional in that. You can be as modern as you want to be. You can have different sides to your personality,
Right.
both modern and traditional. And a lot of the things that may be traditional in the art form that I practice are also actually very, very contemporary and relevant in today's times. One finds themselves circling back to the very same ideas that maybe they've been explored in this tradition, and one sees them happening in the current times as well. So in that sense, it's quite, there's almost like a sense of, can't find the right word, but
It's aligned.
yeah.
There's some alignment.
Yeah.
Because the question that's popping up in my head is, could there be any kind of like misalignment? Ki, oh, I don't want to do this. Traditionally, this is what's expected of me, and I'm going beyond dance. I'm saying expectations, for example.
Yeah.
I have to be graceful, or this is the definition of being a good woman. But in my personal beliefs, this is what I feel.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of misalignment there? I'm not sure if I'm framing the question properly.
I think even if I do find that happening ever, I make a conscious effort to not deny myself the opportunity to just be who I am.
Right.
I consciously fight that. Like I said, the younger generation wants to approach it in a much more free way. You know, while they are practicing a traditional form, the way they carry themselves in their day-to-day life is all kinds of things, modern, traditional, both.
And that's a personal choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Good. Great. That because these, I feel like there are also certain myths associated with some sort of traditional cultural dance form.
That may be true, but I think I've had the privilege to be able to express myself.
Or you're surrounded by the right people who kind
yes.
of
Who-
support that.
Ha.
Is there a sense of competition in the community? Does that impact mental health?
Definitely. I mean, there's competition is there in all fields, but I think here, because everything is so visible and so out there, so public, that you are constantly compared and scrutinized. So yeah, that does have an impact on you. I think especially when you're younger, it can evoke feelings of obsessing over wanting to be better than somebody, or even jealousy amongst friends and all that. But I think you begin to grow out of it, because how much can you obsess over things that you may not always have control over? I think what I've come to realize is what you can have control over is how you groom yourself as an artist, and what is the purpose of you being in that art form. Is it to compare yourself with another artist? Is it to, I don't know, reach somebody else's level? That's not my personal goal.
Yeah.
My personal goal is to really, go into the depths of this art form and get from it something very different.
Right.
Yeah. So I think about my purpose on days like that,
Yeah.
when I get these negative thoughts. And that definitely helps. Yeah.
If someone's not able to do that, let's say if one of our listeners also an artist trying to walk in your shoes, for example, wanting to be a professional dancer, is not able to disconnect or find that middle ground of, okay, why am I here? What is the drive that I have? What's my passion? What's my purpose?
Yeah.
And they're stuck in that negative spiral of comparison, of jealousy. Any message, any suggestion for them?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a hard place to be in. Definitely is very overwhelming, and sometimes it's the only thing you could be thinking about. But I would just advise them that it's detrimental and not, I would say, productive in any way to your growth as a person who wants to be in that field. So, sure, I mean, you can sit with those feelings. You don't have to fight them, but you have to ask yourself why you're feeling that way. And even if you are comparing yourself to somebody else, or if somebody else is comparing you to a third person, you think about what is it that you like about that artist you're comparing yourself to. And is it something that you lack?
Use it as inspiration.
Yeah, and use it as, okay, this is what I need to do to get there.
Right.
And personalize it. Then after you figured that out, you stop thinking about that person. Then you focus on your goal. You take the good things from the people who you look up to or want to be like and work towards it. That's the only way, I guess. Yeah.
Use it as inspiration, motivation.
Absolutely.
Is to move forward.
Yeah.
Interesting. Sometimes in the therapy room also, there are so many clients who come up with similar feelings of comparison, of jealousy, of not feeling good enough. And it's difficult because when I say, if I don't say this, but if I were to say something like, sit with it, like how you're saying, sometimes it's difficult to do that alone. And I think that's where therapy kind of kicks in. That, okay, you have someone to do it with. In case somebody doesn't have a therapist, I think they could do it with a peer or with their guru or something like that. What thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. Like someone you feel comfortable with, talking it out, venting it out helps. And I think for me, it's where you take the negative emotions and try to see how you can use it to your advantage, and in a way that is not going to pull you down, only lift you up. So I think jealousy that way is an emotion. You have to see where it's stemming from.
And very common human
Yeah.
emotion. I mean, don't we all feel a little jealous?
Absolutely. I think it doesn't stop at any age.
Yeah,
It
for
always
sure.
happens. It's just you just learn to view it differently. And I think there's a certain kind of humility in accepting that this is where I lack. And it's our ego that usually stops us and makes us resist. And we keep feeling that negative thing, but there is a certain kind of humility and courage that is required of you to just be like, okay, this is what I'm not doing,
Yeah.
and what I may be lacking, and maybe I need to do to be in a certain place.
It's interesting that you're saying this because according to research, according to scientific research, if we can acknowledge our feelings, label them, accept them, they reduce in intensity. So if I'm feeling 10 out of 10 jealous and I just sit with myself and yeah, I am feeling jealous. I am human, and why and where is it stemming from, like you said, and what can I do with it? So you're letting it occupy some space.
Yeah.
You're not in denial and saying, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
So you're sitting with it, you're processing it. Your feelings will come down from a 10 out of 10 to maybe a 5 out of 10. or
Oh,
6
that's
out
so
of 10.
interesting.
According to research, just putting it out there. So yeah, very rightly said. That happens.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of work that we do in the therapy room as well. Try to just process and sit and not shame ourselves for feeling a certain way. Because shame also comes into the picture that I am feeling jealous. Why am I feeling jealous?
Yeah.
So how petty of me,
True.
So all of that also follows. So yeah, that's very rightly said. In case there's an injury, let's say you hurt, touch wood, I hope it doesn't happen, but let's say someone hurts themselves. What does that look like?
Actually, I have had an injury, which is the kind of injury that stays with you for the rest of your life. I was in college when it happened. It was a ligament tear. I won't go into how it happened and all, but it's a ligament tear in my foot. So, and that's
Yeah.
so, when it happened, I was just like, I was very young at that time. So I was just happy to get some bed rest and wear a cast and chill for a bit, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking long term. But then I think when I read more about what ligament tears can entail and all, it was a 3rd-degree ligament tear. So it doesn't recover on its own.
Right.
All you can do is, like, my physiotherapist at that time, just once the cast came off and it stayed on for like a good 2 months or something, was just gave me some recovery exercises that he recommended I do forever in order to build strength. And he did tell me even at that time that when you overstrain your foot, there are chances that you may feel the pain again. It may swell up, and it often happens if I'm preparing for multiple programs or a program which requires me to really strain. Pain starts to come back up. So I have to be extra careful with all the recovery exercises that he then told me. So there are days when I don't do those exercises because they're such boring, very basic stuff. But then I do them more because I'm also stressing over, oh gosh, this is going to impact my performance later.
Right.
And also you kind of start spiraling thinking that this is my profession, I have to do this for the rest of my life.
Right.
So, if this keeps coming up as a problem, what do I do? And you start looking up all kinds of solutions. Is there a surgery? Is there medical science has progressed so much? I'm sure there is some solution to this. So yeah, you do spiral, but then fortunately till now, it has never gotten to a stage where I feel like I'm not able to do things again.
Yeah.
I've always managed to get through it. But I think even if a little bit of that pain props up again, it brings back the
spiral.
Yeah, the memories from when it first happened. Because actually, ironically, it also happened when I was on a dance trip. And I was supposed to perform at that time in my Guruji's repertory. The repertory had a program at a university, I think, in Lucknow, if I'm not wrong. It happened while I was traveling. So once we reached the place, I couldn't perform. Right, I had already injured myself. I had to wait to get back to Delhi, then get it diagnosed, and then I found out it's a ligament tear and get the cast. So back then also, it stopped me from dancing. So
That's the
association that has been, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think
It's
that's
interesting how the mind works, how memories pop up
absolutely,
again, right?
absolutely.
Of the time that it happened.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, I know a lot of fellow dancers who have recovered through terrible injuries and they continue thriving in their dance and doing it like nothing ever happened to them. So that gives you a lot of courage and a lot of motivation that, you know, this is nothing. If they could do it with like such massive problems and even dancers who are much older recovering and then performing, if they can have that spirit, I think your mind has a lot of power in that sense to convince you.
Because mind and body are connected, I'm also thinking that, let's say, if you're stressed, does that make your pain worse?
I think so. It's like a spiral, right? Because you're thinking about the pain, you're thinking about, oh, how it's going to negatively impact my other performances or the future, whatever. So that kind of,
It's a loop.
it's a loop. So you also have to just calm down and, you know, things that help you meditate, whatever. Tell yourself to not stress over something you can't control. I can control this day, this moment. So I all I can do right now is my recovery exercises. So I do that. And whatever, if I need to wear an ankle support, I wear it and then I dance. Right. So that's what I try to do.
This was so much fun.
Yes, it was for me as well. Very calming.
Very calming. In my presence.
Yes.
In a therapist's presence, you're feeling calm.
Absolutely.
Good. If someone is an aspiring dancer, any suggestions, any advice? Of course, subjective hoga, that's fine. But anything you want to share about what they should do, what they should not do from your experience?
I think when you're getting into a field like dance or any, artistic kind of creative field, I can say this for dance. I'm not very sure how it works in other fields, but there's a lack of sometimes structure. And also initially it takes time to also build financial stability because of the lack of the structure. So I'm starting with the negatives and I should have started with the positives, but that is something that one needs to be prepared for and be able to navigate through. And it's not always easy because that's not an easy space to be in. And I think the positives, of course, if you love what you do, doing it becomes much easier, even on the harder days, because you keep remembering why it is you do it every time that you practice. So that, and also get the right kind of mentoring. Don't take shortcuts. If you want to sustain and be taken as a serious artist, as a serious professional, then get the right kind of training. Don't just jump into like shortcut methods.
How does stability work here in terms of any artist or whoever I've spoken to? Because it really depends on performances, work that comes your way, or even any profession. How does an artist's life become more stable in terms of, I'm purely asking from a financial perspective, like does money play a big role? Because it's not easy earning money.
Yeah, absolutely. Because purely on the basis of performances, you could be having some quite a few in a month or very less in another. So I think there are a lot of other avenues now. Teaching is a big thing. curriculum development or art education. There are many other ways in which you could be diversifying yourself, learning a parallel art form, whether it is videography, photography, lighting, stage lighting, that is. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good advice. Great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed myself. It was like catching up with a friend again.
It was.
Which
Which
was.
it is. Great. Bye, guys.